I'm so honored to be here with all of you in conversation. Again, I'm Dr. Anna Malaika Tubbs, and I am an author. And so I love telling kind of deeper stories. So to get us started, even though we only have 20 minutes, I would really like to center you all and your personal backgrounds and experiences. We're talking today about our youth, of course, that's always at the center of this work. So I'd be curious to hear for each of you, going back to your own youth, what were the places and who were the people who raised you to be the change makers that you are today and raised you to see yourself playing a role in shaping our nation for the better? And I'm going to start with you, Julian.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks to Jim and Common Sense for having us today. I have my tie right here. I was going to wear it, but I remembered that we're in San Francisco. So that's why this thing's poking out like I'm a guy from Scarface sometimes. Well, for me, it would be my mom. You know, I have a twin brother, Joaquin, and we grew up with my mom and my grandmother on the west side of San Antonio. And my mom was a hellraiser. She was a Chicana activist that was part of the Mexican-American civil rights movement in the 1970s. And so when we were growing up, she would drag us to speeches and rallies and long organizational meetings. And I've said often that if you had asked me when I was a teenager, did I ever think that I would go into politics or run for anything or basically anything related to advocacy, I would have said, not just no, but hell no. Because I thought it was boring and I didn't get the point of it. And there was kind of part of me that was cynical. She was part of the Raza Unida party, which was a third party at that time that was really focused on the advancement of the Latino community. And there was sort of there was a real outsider aspect to that. But I think what it gave Joaquin and me was this sense that you could make change, that you should try at least, and also that you should use your talent in part to do something for other people. Mm-hmm. And also that politics was not a dirty word, that it was worth getting into the fight. And so I would say by far, my mom had the greatest impact in that regard.
I love that answer. Yeah. Derek?
So of course, family, but it's like Forrest Gump. That's my life, right? Just kind of moving around. I can recall being very young watching PBS Eyes on the Prize. And the impact that had on me, standing on a couch, shadow boxing, because I was so angry of dogs attacking children. Mm. Or getting older and watching the mayor of Detroit, where I grew up, and him vigorously fighting against the changing dynamics of the city and calling people out for the harm they were creating to neighborhoods like mine. Or going to undergrad in Mississippi and going to my first NAACP meeting in 1990 and realized that the fights from 1954 and 55, Brown versus Board of Education, was in the discussion of the room around a school consent order. And Aaron Henry, who was state president in 1963 when Medgar Evers was assassinated, was still state president. I was shocked. We're still fighting that fight. Or being on campus and running across another Detroiter by the name of Chokwe Lumumba, who's a lawyer, and listening to all the stories of Chokwe on campus, or being mentored by Hollis Watkins, who was the first SNCC recruit in Mississippi, or Congressman Benny Thompson, who was a supervisor who became a congressman in my first real campaign. And since working for Congressman Thompson, I've never applied for a job. So there's been a lot of episodes that have influenced who I am, what I do, and how I see the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Angela?
I grew up in a segregated St. Louis, Missouri in the 1950s and the early 60s. And the community was a Black community. And I often say to people that even though St. Louis was completely segregated, the community that I grew up in was the most integrated community I've ever been in. Because all of the Black community lived together. It was economically integrated. It was integrated in every way you can think of except for race. And that Black community, those adults, did everything they could to protect the children from the sting and burn of racism. And they did it successfully. They literally were scaffolding that allowed us to be able to move up toward fulfilling our full potential, even as we were locked out of the mainstream. That guides me. The joy of that kind of living, the struggle of that kind of living, the dignity of that kind of living, full of the myths of a nation, that was not responding kindly to us, but was out there helping people to have a sense that we could make it right. That's what drives me.
That's beautiful. Wow. So, Angela, I'm going to start with you on this question. You are really the leading expert in terms of the notion of what a multiracial democracy is. And so to ground this conversation, I want us to define that. If you could define what a multiracial democracy is, and then after that definition, if you could tell us if it's something we have yet to accomplish in the United States, or if it's something that we're still building towards.
I'm glad you asked that question on the heels of me answering the one about growing up. Because I grew up actually knowing that the democracy was fake. Because I went to school and we learned all the stories about democracy and how great the nation was, and yet I lived in a segregated community.
Right.
Under all that you're talking about in terms of what is a multiracial democracy, lived in a segregated community in a democracy. I've never forgotten, though, about the ideas that were pushed forward on us. Ideas of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Those are powerful ideas. I have come to understand that the nation was born and created in the gap between high ideals and horrendous actions. And it has evolved and gotten better through struggle. And it is a struggle toward the ideals of the people, by the people, and for the people. In this nation, we are a multiracial people. If there is a democracy, it will be a multiracial democracy, or we will have no democracy at all. And when I think about that democracy, it's democracy for human flourishing. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. Is it so the people can flourish? And we can have a government that produces that, and that people's voices and information inform it. So when I think about a multiracial democracy, I think about it this way: a radically inclusive, all in, mutually accountable. The government is accountable to the people, and the people are accountable to be able to participate and inform. Multiracial democracy in service of human flourishing, so that society can thrive and everyone can have a good life.
Would you say that we have accomplished that? At any point?
Thank you. I don't think so. We have not accomplished it, and we haven't accomplished it because of that gap into which we were born. We haven't come to grips with the racial history. That gap between high ideals and a reality of genocide for the purpose of stealing land, for human bondage, for the purpose of slave labor, and then trying to build this nation on these ideals without ever really coming to grips with the fakeness of what we have been doing. We are not there. However, I will say that we are becoming more conscious of the gap, becoming more conscious of this notion that the only democracy that we will have is a multiracial one, and the only thing that we seem not to have been able to come to grips with in this nation is the issue of race.
Okay. Oh, yeah, someone wanted to clap for that. Derek, I want to know if you can tell us about the unique role that the NAACP plays in building towards this multiracial democracy, and what others can learn from the strategies of an organization with a legacy of really not being fearful in a time when so many leaders are fearful, when we're seeing people kind of step away, step aside, they're silent, they're kind of just getting in line. And the NAACP is known for the opposite of that. So I'd love to know, what is the unique role that the NAACP can play right now, and how others can learn from such a powerful legacy?
Great. NAACP, 116 years old, not because of a singular leader, because it's built off of a Black Baptist church model. It's congregational led, that every member of a unit of good standing have equal voice to everyone else. And so you can have 2,200 units across the country, and because you have diverse leadership, it allows for sustainability and to persevere even through bad individual leaders, right? That has allowed us to sustain and be a container for so many people and movements. If you think about the history, I live in Mississippi now, and I love living in Mississippi because I feel close to the ground, that many of the foot soldiers were part of the container called the NAACP, only seeking freedom. And freedom defined for them could have been a lot of things. Hollis Watkins told me a story one time. They were protesting in McCall, Mississippi, had these two women. They always came and they were protesting a particular store, and they worked at the store. And then all of a sudden, they didn't show up anymore. And they said, hey, you haven't been to the meeting. He said, well, we got our freedom. What you mean? They put us on a cash register. We got freedom now. Freedom defined by individuals who live the reality of segregation and oppression can vary. The NAACP allow for people to gather in ways in which their reality can be actualized through their efforts, and it's congregational led. Our ability as an organization to do two primary things: fight for equal protection under the law for all individuals, and also recognize that each individual's uniqueness is their genius. And in that conflict of recognized individual geniuses and individual voices and individual solutions, you bring that together, those are the solutions to the problems that we are seeking to address. And so for me, the organization is a model of community-centric leadership, not egocentric leadership. Egocentric leadership kills us every time. But if you have the voices of those who are most impacted with equal voice across the table, that's when you really have an opportunity to see movement towards democracy and freedom.
I love that. I love that. And can you speak a little bit to the notion of fearlessness, the notion that we need to hold dear the mission that we kind of began our organizations with, that we can't veer from that in a time where you have to be very brave to do that?
You know, when I first left law school and I went to work in Mississippi as an organizer, the thing I was told immediately said, an organizer's job is to go to a local community and push local leadership forward, not to be in the front of the room, to lead the room, because when we leave that community, those individuals need to feel empowered to continue the work. But the number one thing you have to work towards is allowing them to overcome their fear. Because overcoming fear in community organizing is a big deal. In some communities, overcoming fear meaning being able to go to City Hall or the county courthouse and ask a question around something that you're entitled to. In some communities, overcoming fear is being able to sit in a room and have a voice and you feel comfortable in your voice and you not allow anybody to suffocate your voice. In some communities, it's actually being the person that's the catalyst to help move people towards real action. So overcoming fear is the biggest impediment to freedom, and it's our job is to help people get over their fear, whatever it may be, so that we can be true catalysts for change.
It's beautiful. Oh yes, clap it away. So Julian, you recently gave a talk where you said that our democracy is not failing, but our democracy is being challenged. And you cited examples from recent history where we have had wins, where we have seen progress. And so I'm curious about why that mindset is so important, and how you keep that mindset at the forefront of your work leading the Latino Community Foundation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did say recently that our democracy, it's not failing, that it's a challenged democracy. That was in December before.
Okay, have your thoughts changed?
Just want to note that really quickly. No, but seriously, I mean, I think, you know, that how do you describe this time period that we're in, right? Unprecedented, crazy, chaotic, dark. I know not everybody, of course, feels like that, but I know a lot of people do. At the same time, right now, so far, I firmly believe that we still have it within us to change course, and that is the best hope and the best work that we can do, to organize, to activate, to use our voices, to use every other peaceful means that we can, especially our democracy. to put pressure on those who have the power to change things the way we individually have power. I think that's important because in our system of governance, that's the way that progress is made. And on the other side of things, you have a group of people who would love to be able to pitch their opposition as just violent, as just radical, as just chaotic themselves. They're already doing it, regardless of, that doesn't reflect reality, but that's what they do. Right. It's our job in the tradition of the civil rights movement, in the tradition really of every movement that has moved us forward and made progress in the country, to keep up the faith and to justify that faith by making sacrifices, by being fearless, by going out on a limb right now in the best democratic means that we know how to make change. And I still believe that if that's done, that it will change things. Mm-hmm. These days, like what I've been telling people is it's very hard to believe, very hard to imagine that we're going to go through another 3 years and 10 months of what we've seen over the last 2 months. I mean, think about that. You feel like something's got to give, right? But on our end, what has to give is that we all have to take more responsibility and get into action and change it.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to leave an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit more about how you do that in your community work, in your specific position now, leading such an important historic organization. What do you do to make sure that that level of hope and that level of commitment to the cause is at the forefront of everything that you're doing?
Yeah, well, these days, at the beginning of 2024, I took on this role as CEO of the Latino Community Foundation, which is based here in San Francisco, and it's the nation's largest Latina and Latino serving foundation. It puts dollars into civic engagement, voter mobilization, economic justice, and opportunity work. So, last year we put dollars into organizations that were out there getting voters informed and mobilizing them throughout California and then also in Arizona and Nevada. The foundation traditionally has been a California foundation, and my vision is to make it a national foundation within the next decade. Mm-hmm. And we started last year with, dipping our feet into Arizona and Nevada, but also we administer 18 different giving circles in the state of California. So folks that pool their resources and then give to organizations in their local communities that are making a difference. We support organizations that are working with farm workers and other vulnerable communities to try and make change, policy change. And then also, because we're a community foundation as opposed to a purely private charity, we're able to do advocacy. So we stake out positions and use our voice in Sacramento and then increasingly in DC also.
Amazing, amazing. So in our final 5 minutes, I want us to talk about our youth, which is again the center of the work that Common Sense Media does. And we often speak about protecting our youth and decisions we have to make for our youth, but I want us to think and continue a conversation around how we work with our youth. So all the themes that we've discussed around fearlessness, around advocacy, around staying committed to building something that we have yet to fully see and yet to fully realize. I would love if each of you could tell me how you think we can work alongside our youth to really build that multiracial democracy kind of once and for all. Of course, it will be ever changing and we'll be building it and experimenting together. But how do we do that alongside our youth, many of them here today? And Derek, if you could start us off with that one, that would be great.
Sure. Intergenerational organizing is the only successful model that has worked in the African American advocacy tradition. If you think about all of our movement, it has always been the energy of our young people, the wisdom of elders, and those in between, continuity. And so with that, it is honoring and respecting youth leadership when it emerges, supporting it, and recognizing that none of us have all of the solutions, all of us have a piece of it. And so where a young person piece of solution partnered with the older person piece of solution could be the actual solution, and creating the ability for that to happen. Because now is such a unique time, we have to make sure both young and old don't get distracted with this hand here and the middle fingers being pointed at them down here. Because that's exactly what's happened. DEI and same-sex marriages and LGBTQI plus or gender, whatever the distraction over here, what is really taking place is a radical redesign of the role of government. And expectations that people have grown accustomed to. So what they're doing here, they're stealing your Social Security, they're stealing your veterans benefits, they're stealing student loan programs, and having people to understand that it's not about one generation versus another generation. It's about what we would like to see as a quality of life for everyone, and how do we leverage those who are best skilled to advance and that advocacy energy, whether young or old, that will get us to that point. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at the history of the civil rights movement was only successful because Ella Baker said, I'm not going to allow you male chauvinists at the NAACP dictate to me. I'm not going to allow you old people to direct these young people on what they should do. I'm going to give them a container and freedom to push the needle. That Bayard Rusher says, I don't care what you call me because I am who I am, and I'm not going to suppress my identity for your comfort because I have a genius to add. That the wisdom of A. Philip Randolph could convene the table of all the egos around there and say, this will be the strategy, and they will all conform. That's the success of the civil rights movement. Those young people who were SNCC, that individual who refused to reject his identity of being a gay black male, and this seasoned senior individual coming together to say, this is the way forward. It wasn't a charismatic leader. It wasn't the best speaker. It was strategy and accepting all of the geniuses that came to the table to get to an end result.
Mm-hmm.
And what Derek has just described is transformative solidarity. That is transformative solidarity. He described it within the context of the NAACP. Now we need to do it within the context of the nation. Yes. And when he talked about the distraction and the strategy, all who are being attracted to the distractions have to understand that strategy will kill us all. Mm-hmm. And therefore we have to find each other in a way we never have. Usually we do transactional solidarity. You sign my petition, I'll show up for your march. That's not going to work now. That the young people and the older, everybody who's seen what is dear to them impacted here has to understand that we have to find each other and understand that your survival is my survival, your winning is my winning, and that winning is all of us losing. Transformative solidarity is the only way to go forward at this moment, and I thank you for giving such a concrete example of it.
I would just agree with all of that and say that oftentimes, when I talk to folks in high school or college, I tell them that everybody says you're the future, which is true, but you're also the present. And I think especially in this moment that we're in, that is so unprecedented and requires new ways of thinking and approaching things, and more than anything else requires a tremendous amount of energy, because there's a lot of fatigue out there, pushing back and resisting and all of that. We need young people. We need their voices. You need their idealism. You need their energy. You need their new way of looking at things and not accepting that things have to be the way that they were. I got into politics first. I ran for office and got elected to the city council when I was 26. And last fall, my brother Joaquin and I turned 50. So I was finally getting the gray hair and stuff. But when I was, coming up in politics, I was always a young candidate, right? And even now, as I don't think I'm old, but I get older, I still see the wisdom in having, I especially now see the wisdom in having all of those things, the energy, the idealism, the different way of looking at things, and also balanced with people who have experience and can help show the way. Because I don't think either one can get dismissed, right? And I think if we can do that, we're going to be better off for it.
I agree. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you all.